Today we have with us a man of many talents. He's a Rhodes Scholar, he's a Columbia University graduate, a student of intellectual history of public policy, and the co-founder and curator of the Pink List India, national spokesperson of NCP SP, and an openly out gay politician in India. Welcome, Anish.
Thank you very, very much. Very glad to be here. So I came out publicly in 2019 through the creation of the Pink List. Came out in a Times of India article that said, "You're always told you can't be queer and in Indian politics, that needs to change." Should never ask a politician this question. How long are we going to dictate what you should wear, what you should do, who you should marry, what you should eat? That doesn't work. Poetry is definitely my favorite genre of literature. I read a lot of fiction as well. And my favorite poet is Aga Shahid. For the first time, you're witnessing a "tu janta hai mera baap kaun hai" culture in Maharashtra. That is not acceptable. There's just Deep drama, and Deep is a makeup artist and does such fabulous content and is a dear friend as well. Abhi to Rajniti ka topi pehna hai, so we have to be nice to everyone for the first few months. Then we can critique.
So, tell me about your childhood. How has it been? How was it while you were growing up?
So, I grew up in Mumbai and went to school there. And I come from a family that's not political at all. My father's an income tax consultant and the family sort of works in that field. But my grandfather was an educationist. And he passed away before I was born, but he helped Baba Sahib Ambedkar with the drafting of the Constitution, the Hindu Code Bill, became the principal of Government Law College and the Vice Chancellor of Mumbai University, and the Sheriff of Mumbai. And there's always been a public spiritedness that runs in the family because there were stories that I was told as a kid of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, of Baba Sahib Ambedkar, of others who've given back to the country. And I always wanted to give back in some way or the other. And that meant that I wanted to be a lawyer or an IAS officer or a diplomat. And those were the sort of passions that kept me excited to give back. And then I ended up going to Columbia University for my undergraduate degree, where I studied comparative literature. Over the course of my time there, which is something I know we'll come to, I came out of the closet and sort of had a different turning. So the growing up had a few phases.
Okay. So, before we talk in detail about your coming out story, as a Rhodes Scholar and as an intellectual, I want you to give the students who are aspiring to go to foreign countries for pursuing higher education as to how they should approach these things and what's the way to enter these universities. They are sort of big names.
So for all of those who are watching, I think to get a prestigious scholarship, to be able to study at some of these universities, it's incredibly important to be true to what you believe in and to love what you're doing. And I think that's what I realized early on. I went to Columbia University thinking, like every other Indian student, that I was going to study economics and political science, which my father would have been very proud of. But I ended up studying comparative literature. I studied Francophone West Africa and French literature and followed my passions and still managed to come back and run an election campaign. When I went to Oxford, I got the Rhodes to study intellectual history and public policy. I studied things that you don't think are normally career-oriented subjects or degrees, and ended up loving what I did and ensured that I got a skill set that's incredibly useful to the role I play today as national spokesperson for the NCP SP. They've been incredibly useful in helping me form connections and generate sort of goodwill amongst people across the world. And they've been very, very useful in ensuring that I can be proud of my identity, of myself, and come with the level of confidence that I do to the workplace today.
Yeah, so coming back to the question about your sexuality, what's your coming out story and when did you realize, first of all, and how difficult it was for you?
Again, I was at university in the US when I sort of came out. I realized then that coming out would mean an abandoning of the other dreams that I held, right? That I would not be able to sort of aspire towards being a politician or a diplomat anymore. And that's the fear I had. And so I switched gears. I was studying Francophone West Africa, as I told you. I was going to become a nice professor in the US. And then I got the opportunity to come back to India, right? And I was very grateful that I had an incredibly supportive family. I had incredibly supportive friends. And over the course of my coming out, over the election campaign, working for the Congress Party in Maharashtra, I realized that I was welcomed by an incredibly supportive community across the country. So I came out publicly in 2019 through the creation of the Pink List, came out in a Times of India article that said, "You're always told you can't be queer and in Indian politics, that needs to change." And it became a moment that truly served as a catalyst for understanding that my identity was not going to serve as a barrier to achieving my goals, my dreams, and my aspirations in politics.
You mentioned Pink List India. Please tell our viewers what exactly is Pink List India.
So Pink List India is the country's first archive of politicians supporting LGBTQ plus rights. We track every single Lok Sabha MP and every single statement they've made on LGBTQ plus issues. And what that basically allows us to do is to say that LGBTQ plus rights are human rights. And if you're standing for equality, if you're standing for the rights of the marginalized, if you're standing for equal rights for every single Indian, these rights should extend to everyone regardless of caste, class, religion, gender, or sexuality. And that's how Pink List India was created. We've been doing this for the last 5 years, and it's been an incredibly rewarding experience to sort of carry forward social activism in the political sphere.
So, in the Indian political landscape, people do not really consider things like what politicians have spoken about queer rights and what their attitude is. Because right now, even the critical issues are sometimes ignored. So, do you think that people will really consider this aspect, that which politician is sort of supporting the queer rights before casting?
But it's not about supporting queer rights, right? That I think my position as national spokesperson, my role within the party, the advocacy that I do, is not about saying that support LGBTQ plus rights in isolation. We have to create a new political imagination. What does progressive politics look like in the 21st century? What does it mean to live by the Constitution in today's day and age? What does it mean to enshrine the values of liberty, equality, fraternity in a sort of era where young people are living the lives they want to lead? So queerness is folded into a larger politics, a politics of care, a politics of love, a politics of freedom that says, I don't care about what you wear, what you eat, who you love, right? So I think that's the politics we have to bring to the forefront. That today, when I speak about LGBTQ plus rights, I also speak about the rights of other minorities. I also speak about differently abled rights. I also speak about climate change. I also speak about the persecution of minorities on the basis of religion and caste. So all these struggles are intertwined, and we have to treat them as such.
So, as you mentioned that your parents have been supportive, and how's the party's attitude been? Like, has it been a hindrance, or the party has been supportive, or it's really not a critical factor in?
Never been a critical factor. And I don't think Supriya or Pawar Sahib have once asked me about my sexuality. And in fact, I've always encouraged the pursuit of progressive politics within the party. Pawar Sahib was the first person, when he was defense minister, to allow women to serve in the defense forces. This is a party of progressive values that lives by those progressive values. I'm glad to be in a party that walks the talk. The party started an LGBTQ plus cell long before I joined the party. The party has been speaking about differently abled rights long before I joined the party. And so my joining the party is nothing new. I think it's an extension of the values that the party stands for. The tradition of Shiv Shahu Phule Ambedkar, the ideology of progress that Maharashtra has always stood for and the country has always stood for, that I'm taking forward in some way. So, I mean, you've just seen, I just got a phone call from Supriya right now, and the working relationship is extremely cordial. It's one that's marked by respect and one that's marked by an understanding that my role as national spokesperson is one that involves taking the party's ideology to the national level, to speak about the elections in Maharashtra, and to also at the same time represent the queer community and fight for those rights as well. And they're not separate things, and the party is standing by me on one front and on the other, which I think I'm incredibly grateful for. And I can't say very many parties in the country would be this progressive.
So, you're also the youngest national spokesperson. And this Lok Sabha has seen the entry of many young and promising politicians. And that's something that's really incredible. So how do you view that, and how is NCP-SP encouraging the participation of youth?
So, this is a remarkably different Lok Sabha, right? We're seeing more young people in politics. We're seeing a revived, re-energized Lok Sabha with opposition benches thumping away. We're seeing a Lok Sabha where the government cannot say what it wants and get away with it, right? And that's reflected in a commitment to young people in politics across party lines. Young people today want to make a difference. And after the 4th of June, more young people are entering politics than ever before. That's because they see hope. They see a way for them to contribute. For the last 10 years, unfortunately, we've been told that one man gets to decide what's right for the country and none of us should question his decision. We've been told that a single party government without a coalition is better for the country because they make better decisions. But that's ended up disastrously. The large infrastructure projects that we sort of acclaim and talk so highly of are developing cracks already. The public sector, industries and companies that the government is supposed to manage are faring disastrously. The social justice and welfare policies are crumbling. And the only narrative that we see is a narrative of hate, of divisiveness, of discrimination on the grounds of religion or caste. And that's what people are angry about and want to change. And so young people are taking the lead. They're speaking up, standing out, and they're standing up, speaking out, and making the difference that you see across the country today. And today, I think no political party can afford to ignore young people. Every single political party has recognized that the youth will be the voice of the country, they will be the voice of the party, and they will give new lifeblood to the party. My party, the NCP-SP, was split undemocratically and unconstitutionally not too long ago. And after that, we've taken this as an opportunity rather than as a setback. And we've said that, you know what? You broke our party. You played dirty politics. Fine. This election, we're going to give tickets to almost 70% of candidates who've not contested before. To young people, to people who don't come from political families, to people who don't have a political background. And we're going to give them a shot at success. They've made me national spokesperson. I don't come from a political family. It's very rare for parties in India. It's very rare for politics in India to have this sort of infusion of young energy. And it's happening today, and it's happening across the country, and it will mean the sort of transformation of Indian politics for the coming decades, not just the coming years.
So, do you think that the typical image of a politician in India has kind of changed now? And has it become a more inclusive space because we are seeing an gay man entering into politics? We are seeing some really promising young people entering into politics. And if yes, then who do you give the credit to?
Oof. To my party leader, Pawar Sahib and Supriya Tai, of course. But I joke. I think I give the credit to the way the country is changing. We're a young country. More than 50% of this country is under the age of 25. And for too long, our politics has not represented that energy, that youth, that dynamism. And it's finally changing for the better. And people across party lines are realizing this. Because the power of this country lies in its youth. Now, I think the funny thing you've asked is, how has politics changed? Now, this is what a politician now looks like. I'm not wearing white on white. I'm wearing fun socks and brown Oxfords. I get to sort of come in pastels to work. And the biggest question people ask is not why are you gay, but how come you have curly hair? Because, in politics, you're always told keep a nice short haircut, and I keep my curls and I'm proud of them. So I think you're seeing politicians look different, talk different, sort of speak about issues that are not traditional political issues. And that's an amazing change. And I think that's what we have to support and encourage.
I think a little bit credit goes to Anish as well for changing that narrative.
मेरा देश बदल रहा है, आगे बढ़ रहा है, to copy a BJP line.
And moving on, this one very important question. I feel that since you come from a background which has been supportive of you coming out as a queer person, and you've been accepted into the politics of this country, but there are many queer people who are very scared to come out first of all and forget joining the politics. Do you think that caste, class and the societal background also come into play?
Absolutely. Listen, I come from privilege, which is why I have the opportunity to sit where I'm sitting today. I come from caste privilege, I come from class privilege. I grew up in a city. I grew up in Mumbai, which is a fairly progressive city, right? And I come from a progressive family. That's not the case with everybody, right? For so many young queer people today, coming out remains a struggle. Coming out remains a distant dream. And I think for me, it's incredibly important to create the structures that allow younger people to come out, that allow them to know that they have support systems. As a matter of principle, not as a matter of some identity politics or something else. Is that if some young person is being driven to the brink of dying by suicide because they're being bullied because of their identity, it is our right and it is our duty to stand by them. We cannot let this happen to young people. This is just unjust. And that's what I think I'm invested and interested in changing. That we have to make it possible for younger queer people to come out. We have to create these structures that allow them to lead full lives because they deserve it. And we have to build a society that's accepting, that's loving, and that's caring. We've forgotten the language of care in this country today. We've grown so used to hate. We're like, acha, wo ye hai, wo hai. Like, no. The point is that I don't care if you're gay. Because to me, what matters more is that you are happy, that you are not feeling the pressure of societal burdens around you. And that's a struggle that everybody can get behind. And that's a struggle that young people are fighting. Young people who come from caste marginalized backgrounds, who come from religious minority backgrounds, who are differently abled, who are bullied for being fat or too thin, who are being bullied for being women. You know, this is the change we're seeing today, where people are saying no longer will we tolerate this nonsense. And they're saying that we will accept ourselves for who we are and we will demand acceptance from society on those grounds. And that's what I hope to change.
So imagine there's a queer person sitting in a tier 2, tier 3 city of our country, and the struggles, of course, are very, very high and challenging for that person. So if he or she or if them are wanting to come out, what should they do? Because people are confused and people are scared.
Coming out is a deeply personal decision. And I think it's one that also needs to be taken with a lot of foresight and with a lot of practical considerations in mind. I think the first step that I always encourage people to take care of is to ensure that they are financially independent or that they can have some support systems. I always say that we have two kinds of families. Families of birth and families of choice. And both are equally important. We're always told blood is thicker than water. But kuch rishte dosti ki bhi hote hain. And those are the bonds that we've created across time, across queer and non-queer friendships and relationships that hold equal importance, that support you in your toughest times. So making sure you have support systems is incredibly important. And then you can come out to your family, to friends, to society, because you know you have someone to fall back on. I think the next thing to know is that the law is now by your side. I got a phone call from somebody who was a judge in rural UP, who was a district level judge. And she told me that I'm afraid to come out with my partner because I'm a judge. And I said, you know what? As long as your family accepts you, as long as you know that your support systems are intact, if you're scared of the law, then let me assure you that if you come out and you face a hurdle, I will be there the next day. Because the law is on your side. What you are doing is not a crime. Your identity is not a crime. And so today, to come out, if you have the support of your loved ones around you, I think you can now take that step of living your full life, of being true to your identity. And that's not going to be easy. It's definitely not been easy here, right?
So the same-sex marriage is still not legalized, and the Supreme Court, though, decriminalized homosexuality. Do you think there's still a very long way to go?
I've always believed that you can't keep knocking on the court's doors all the time. That's why I'm in politics. Change comes when you hold elected representatives accountable. And I think that process has begun today. We have to create a coalition of voices that stand up for equal rights. That the rights of queer people are not separate from the rights of differently abled people, are not separate from the rights of caste minorities, are not separate from the rights of religious minorities, are not separate from the demands for climate change justice. So you have to ensure that you create a political platform that talks of a language of love, that talks of a language of inclusion, that talks of a language of self-respect. And that's the tradition we've been following in our country. So, my party, the NCP-SP, was started by Sharad Pawar ji. And Pawar Sahib was a sort of disciple of Yashwantrao Chavan, who was one of the architects of modern Maharashtra. And Yashwantrao Chavan was one of the most progressive leaders we've had in the country so far. He truly embodied the ideals of Shiva Shahu Phule Ambedkar, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, Shahu Maharaj, Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, and Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar, which believed that the rights granted to every citizen are the rights granted by the Constitution. So the fight for marriage equality might be slow, but it's a fight that is valid because it's a fight that is enshrined in the Constitution of this country. It's a promise of justice that's made by the sort of Constitution that governs all of us, and it's a promise that will be fulfilled, if not today, then tomorrow.
So, while I was researching about you, of course, I came across a newspaper article where the headline said that it was a statement of yours that politicians need to read poetry and more poets need to enter politics.
You know, after I read that article and gave that statement, somebody pointed out to me that my grandfather had made a very similar statement almost 50 years ago in the 1970s at some college event that he was speaking at the time. And it's a statement that holds so true, because we need politicians who read. We need politicians who care. And poetry is the most sublime form of understanding human emotion. It's one that teaches you that there's no black or white, but only grey. There's no one interpretation. There's no single right or wrong. And reading poetry is what will save this country. You know? Because today, we need to acknowledge that we get to choose the path we go on. Poetry teaches you that there are multiple interpretations that need to be discussed and debated. When you and I discuss poetry, I don't say that you're wrong or I'm right because I read a poem differently. We engage, we discuss, we come to a common understanding. Maybe I learn something from you and you learn something from me. We need that today. Look at what Parliament has become. We're in Delhi today. Until the 4th of June results, we had made a mockery of the highest parliamentary institution in the country, the Lok Sabha. There were no debates, no discussions, bills were being steamrolled through, because there wasn't a belief in debate and discussion. Our politicians had forgotten that they are here to serve people, but also to discuss and debate the best ideas. Humne la diya, aap sirf haan ya na bolo. That's not the culture that we can continue. That's a culture that comes from an authoritarian mindset. A person who reads poetry will not sort of believe in this culture. A very dear friend of mine, I'll tell you just a very quick anecdote, T. Sumathi Akka, Thamilachit Tangapandyan. She's a DMK MP from Chennai South. And we met many years ago. And I gifted her a book of poetry. And ever since then, we've been gifting each other books of poetry. And you must hear her speeches in Parliament. When I meet Supriyatai, we exchange books. The first thing I noticed when I went to Supriyatai's house in Pune was that the pride of place in the living room was occupied by a bookshelf. And the first question she asked me long before I joined the party also and long before I was even interested in joining politics was, what are you reading? When I meet Pawar Sahib, he asks me, what are you reading? When I gift him anything or I come to the party office, I come with a book. Because there's a culture of reading that's important. And it reflects in the speeches. Look at Sumati Akka's speeches in Parliament. Look at Supriyatai's speeches in Parliament. Look at Pawar Sahib's old speeches. Politicians who read are more nuanced, are more mature, are more understanding, and are more committed to find solutions, not to just make some hawa mein speech. Bas ho gaya. This is not a prime time debate. We need to take politics away from that. You're not here to prove a point. You're here to find solutions together. And that comes when you read poetry.
So, this kind of makes me very curious to ask that what poetry and what literature do you read?
A lot, so poetry is definitely my favorite genre of literature. I read a lot of fiction as well. And my favorite poet is Agha Shahid Ali, Kashmiri poet. He's someone who's been truly, deeply inspiring. And I think reading Shahid's poetry has been incredibly important to me. There's also Ocean Vuong, who's a Vietnamese-American poet who's based in the US and writes beautifully about pain, about longing, about belonging. Back here, I think there have been incredible poets who've sort of made their mark. There's Ranjit Hoskote, who's a fabulous poet from Maharashtra and writes in English. There's also, in my opinion, one of my favorite poets who's a much older poet. He passed away not too long ago, Nissim Ezekiel, who writes beautifully about uh, ordinariness of life. And he's got a poem called Night of the Scorpion about a woman who gets bit by a scorpion and the sort of commotion that ensues. So even there, I think we'll come to my office in a little bit, but my bookshelf is the first thing I got into the office once I came here, because I said, I need to have my books around, and those books are my dearest friends and my closest companions. So they occupy pride of place.
So, but have you ever read Khalid Hosseini?
I have read Khalid Hosseini. And the Kite Runner is controversial because I think a lot of people don't like it very much. Now in my new Netaji role, I have decided I will not critique anything. So I just like everything. But I have read the Kite Runner.
I think as a reader, you have the right to critique.
वो तो हम बाद में करेंगे. अभी तो राजनीति का टोपी पहना है, तो we have to be nice to everyone for the first few months. Then we can critique. Constructive politician, new age politician. गालियाँ क्यों देनी already? हाँ. What do you read?
I do read Khalid Hosseini a lot, and then I love
Oh, wow.
Beat Fairs, Khalid,
Oof.
Moving Ka Moving, and Nazir Akbar.
I wrote an essay on the Mushaira and about the tradition of the Mushaira and how it became an institution that allowed for the transmission of poetry. And I'm so lucky because in Delhi, I live on Panchkaya Road, right next to the tomb of Zauq, who was one of the finest shires and who's sort of engaged in debates with the sort of Mushaira culture of the 19th century in a very profound manner. And it's a shock that I have got after coming to Delhi, because you realize so much of Urdu poetry lies here and so much of the cultural fabric of the city is shaped by poetry.
Definitely. Shaped by poetry, art and literature. And I would suggest you to please read Chitra Banerjee also. She's a fabulous...
I must read her book. I have it in my bookshelf, so I must. It's been a long reading list that has been kept to the wayside because of the elections in Maharashtra and campaigning, which has taken more center stage. So I think किताबों को पढ़ने के लिए अभी तो वक्त नहीं मिला है, but time will have to be carved out.
Okay, so moving on. Shabnam Mosi was actually the first transgender MLA who kind of paved the way for queer people in Indian politics. But after that, we haven't really seen many queer people joining the political, landscape.
No, because just after Shabnam Mosi, there were a couple of people who got elected. After Shabnam Mosi's election in Madhya Pradesh, you had Madhu Kinnar, who became the mayor of Raigad in Chhattisgarh. You have Disha Pinky Sheikh, who's the spokesperson for the Vanchit Bahujan Aghadi as a trans woman who's from an NT-DNT community. Very recently, after I was appointed, you have Mario Da Penha, who's become the head of the All India Professional Congress's newly created LGBTQIA plus vertical. So you've seen so many cool young queer people join politics now. And I think their journeys have been facilitated by the sort of recent court verdicts that have come in the favor of queer rights. They've also been facilitated by an India that's changing. I see the comments on the videos that have come out in the recent past, and ever since I got appointed, there's been a lot of media buzz around this. And it's overwhelmingly positive. The comments are so positive. And it's so heartwarming to see. And so many of the comments are like, wow, the comment section passes the vibe check, because we expected so many negative comments. But it's truly the case today.
So you're saying that the changes are really happening?
The country is a different country than it was 10 years ago, than it was 20 years ago. It's high time we woke up to that. And I think the people of this country recognize that. It's high time others recognize it as well. Our judiciary needs to recognize it. The political class needs to recognize it. The sort of business and industry needs to recognize it. And the media needs to recognize it. And I think they have been recognizing it. And that's why you're seeing the changes you're seeing today.
So, going a little back in time, and how did you find yourself in, campaigning for political parties here in India from Colombia?
It was a funny story. I sort of had given up all hopes of coming back and working in politics, and then I got the chance to run Milind Devra's campaign, and he was running for MP from the Congress Party in South Mumbai. And it was an incredible experience. I think for the first time I realized that if you work in politics, you can bring about change at a scale that is impossible through any other avenue. You can connect the dots. You can make magic happen. You can truly transform the lives of lakhs of people. And I think एक बार चटक लग गई तो अभी हम चलते गए. So I ran that campaign and then was involved politically over the course of the next few years. I ended up going to Oxford, where I was a Rhodes Scholar. I studied I studied intellectual history and then public policy. I got an MPP from the Blavatnik School of Government at Oxford. Really sort of gained the skills that I need, right? Because I said if I want to be in politics, that I don't want to be like other politicians. I want to be able to ensure that I bring the sort of best insights, the best practices from across the world, and ensure that I bring them to my home state, to my home country, to ensure that we are not competing with each other, but with the world. I'm tired of saying that Mumbai has to compare with Delhi or has to compare with Chennai. No. Mumbai has to compare with Dubai. Mumbai has to compare with Singapore. Mumbai has to compare with New York. I made the decision to leave New York and come back to Mumbai. I made the decision to leave London and come back to Mumbai. And I want other people in other countries to make that decision and come to India even if they're not Indian. That's the country we have to create. You can't be a superpower by only sort of speaking of being a superpower. You have to ensure that you bring the best talent, the best ideas, and create an atmosphere that's conducive. Why do you think these countries succeed? Why do you think we need to change politics? It's because we need to create a country where these ideas can blossom. And the only way to make that possible is through politics. And I realized that very early on. Because you can have the best ideas, but if the structures don't exist to allow those best ideas to thrive, if you don't have freedom of speech, if you're scared to say what you want to say, then how will you innovate? How will you get the most brilliant minds to create the next one? Clearly, every interview I do, I must be swatting flies. लोग बोलते रहते हैं ना कि मच्छर मारते रहते हैं politicians यही. But you have to create those structures. And I think it's incredibly important to create those structures, and politics is the right medium to do that. And when I came to the 2024 elections, I was helping Supriyatai with the party's campaign efforts. I was helping sort of set up their media cell and ensure that the party's narrative gets taken forward and the ideological thrust of the party gets taken forward. And then I was given the opportunity to serve as national spokesperson, and it was an offer that I could not refuse. And so I think I find myself incredibly grateful to be part of a party that values young people in politics. And it was a tough choice. You know, as young people were told, politics is a dirty game, it's not for us, it's not for people like you and me, it's not going to be for someone who doesn't want to get their hands dirty. If you don't come from a political family, you won't get a chance in politics. But I got one here. And I said, you know what? Let's gamble. Let's take a high risk, high reward decision and decide to jump into the deep end of the pool. And I said, if you have to make a change, you have to be a part of the system. And if all of us say that we don't want to be a part of the system, then nothing will change.
Are you planning to contest in the upcoming elections?
Should never ask a politician this question. Agar janta janardhan chahe, to hum janta ki seva mein hazir hai. But no, I think on a more serious note, you shouldn't run before you can walk. I think I'm already incredibly grateful to the party for giving me the opportunity to be national spokesperson at the age of 28. I was 27 when I was appointed not too long ago. And it's an incredibly big responsibility. And I need to prove myself in this capacity. And I hope that I will add value to the party. I hope that I will be able to demonstrate that I can take the party's ideology forward. And I think most certainly in the future, these are ways to strengthen the party. And if the party asks you to contest, you contest.
So one of the remarkable changes that we have noticed is that the political parties have now started first talking about the LGBTQ rights, and they have also now included it in the election manifestos in the previous elections. So how do you view this change?
We're in a great, great manifesto moment. I think many major parties, including my own, which has an LGBT cell headed by Priya Patil from 2020 onwards, have included LGBTQ plus rights in their manifestos. And we've had the most comprehensive set of promises on LGBTQ plus rights. We've included so many provisions ranging from marriage to inheritance to sort of same-sex partner benefits to horizontal reservations for transgender persons and equal access to education and employment. These are promises that I want to actually see the party take forward. I think there's definitely going to be an attempt on my end and from several people within the party to ensure that we live up to those promises when we get elected to the state government in Maharashtra. That these promises cannot exist merely on paper. And that's a collective effort. We have to ensure that all political parties that included these policies in their manifesto are held accountable to them. The BJP has included transgender rights in their manifesto. They've promised Garima Grahs in every district of this country. But the existing Garima Grahs have no money. So if you're making a manifesto promise, you have to put your money where your mouth is. A Garima Grah is a shelter home for transgender people who have been thrown out of their homes or their families have abandoned them or they're not getting support from their families. They're incredibly important. We have to support people who do not have access to these resources to allow them to gain equal access to education and employment. The BJP has also promised access to education and employment but has not given horizontal reservations, despite including this in their manifesto. So I think we now need to see parties actually take action. They're in power in some parties that promise these things and power at the national level. Other parties have state governments. So let's start seeing action across the country by parties that have committed to supporting LGBTQ plus rights.
One very off-the-beat question. Do you also observe and watch the creators, the queer creators who are creating content on social media, and because in a way it has been influencing people positively. So do you watch it, and who's your favorite?
Who's my favorite? Baap Re, you can't ask me these questions because I'm friends with all of them. But I watch all of them. I think it's so refreshing to see. And I think, here are people living their best lives. And they're truly making a difference. They're changing perceptions, whether you like it or not. And they're doing it on Instagram by making cool, fun reels. They're normalizing queer lives and queer identities in a way that the mainstream media or other platforms could not for so many years. I won't name favorites because I have all of them who are my favorites, but I will say this, right? I think the dark side to that is that we witnessed a rise in hate speech, in a rise in discrimination and bullying online. A young queer kid lost his life due to that bullying not too long ago. And I think that has to serve as a wake-up call to all of us. That before people make homophobic or dirty or derogatory comments on a post, they need to think twice. What are these people doing? You're sitting in your small room typing out a hate comment, having no idea of the pain that you inflict upon somebody, of the sort of hatred that you spread in society. For you, it's a comment. For that person, it's their life. And in politics, you develop a thick skin, right? In politics, I know that I'm going to get some negativity and hatred, and I've worked in this business for 10 years. Koi dhamka nahi sakta, koi farak nahi padta. But you can't do that to a young kid. You can't do this at a time when young people are finally finding the freedom to be themselves. And so we have to now find a way, through our queer creators, but through others as well, to create a supportive environment. Why are we filled with so much hate? Why do we want to belittle somebody or bring somebody down? That's what we need to change. And that's what I think queer creators are changing online. They're leading their own lives authentically, giving no care to the sort of comments they get or the haters. And what you're realizing is that the ones who support you far outnumber the ones who hate on you. And that's the country I want to see today. That's the India I believe in. Where for every 5 people who spread a message of hate, there are 100 people spreading a message of love. And those are the 100 people who voted in the Lok Sabha elections. Those are the 100 people who will vote in the Maharashtra elections. And those are the 100 people who are going to change this country for the better.
So you haven't picked your favorite, that's okay. But name a few creators so that people also, sort of know that these are the creators they need to look out for, and in a way to get awareness and to be aware about what is going on and how to perceive LGBTQ rights.
I would recommend the LGBTQ Plus Center in Delhi, which is an incredible institution and organization that has a very fun Instagram presence. There's just Deep Drama, and Deep is a makeup artist and does such fabulous content and is a dear friend as well. And the third person I would recommend, if I have to choose my top 3, is Grace Banu, who's a Dalit trans activist who's spoken about horizontal reservations and really highlighted the fact that queer identities have to be sort of understood alongside other identities and that our fight is intersectional. So these are my top 3 picks for your social media influencers who you should be following.
So are you like a typical Marathi guy? And because I want to know more about what food one should, when I visited Nagpur recently and I was like, I want to have a misal pav.
Yes, I love misal, but my favorite food, my comfort food is varan bhat. So varan bhat is number 1 comfort food, and I love Colombi fry, which is a very Malwani dish, which is made in the Konkan. You have a nice prawn dish. So those are my 2 favorites, but varan bhat is A+. It's my comfort food. It's the only thing I know how to make well, and it's what I have at home when I'm feeling under the weather. It's been a long day.
As a non-Marathi, what exactly is varan bhat?
It's a very sort of nice dal without any tadka. So it's an almost sweetish dal that you have with good jaggery and lots of ghee, desi ghee. So it's tur dal, ghee and jaggery, a little bit of jaggery.
So in the 2024 Lok Sabha elections, the NCP-SP had a really commendable performance.
8 out of 10 seats.
Yeah. So does that sort of give you the confidence, give the party the confidence that the change is going to happen?
2 days after the Lok Sabha election results, Pawar Sahib was on the road campaigning for the Vidhan Sabha elections. We're not a party that takes the people's mandate lightly. We know that we've been given a historic mandate. 8 out of 10 seats is a sort of record-breaking strike rate. We know that the people of Maharashtra have placed their faith in us, but now it's our time to deliver. We have to work twice as hard and ensure that the people of Maharashtra reimpose their faith in us in the Vidhan Sabha elections. And so we are not overconfident. And in fact, Supriya Tai and Amol Dada, who's party MP from Shirur, have been saying that this is not the time to rest, it's the time to sort of start working twice as hard. And that's what the party is doing. Today, Pawar Sahib is addressing rallies in one part of the state. Jayant Patil Sahib, who's the state president, and Amol Kolheji are addressing the Shiva Swarajya Yatra in another part of the state. Supriya Tai is addressing rallies in another part of the state. And other leaders like Rohit Pawarji and others are addressing rallies in their own parts of the state. And so the party is reinvigorated and ready to go. I was part of the Shiva Swarajya Yatra not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago in Zunnar. And the party was incredibly proactive in ensuring that the people of the state heard the vision that we have to offer to the people of Maharashtra. And we're a back to the basics party. Unlike our opponents who have crores and crores to spend on event management, we're going back to the basics. We put up one little tent and start our rally. There's street plays being performed. There's sort of tutari players playing tutari. There's sort of a feel to the campaign that feels like it is honest and true to what politics should be. Not a stage-managed drama, PR production, but a true engagement with the people where somebody from the audience is yelling, why aren't you talking about this? Somebody's coming on stage with their demands and giving those demands to party leaders. People are making it a point to speak to the politician even though he might have been a former chief minister, former revenue minister, former finance minister, current MP. That's the politics we're bringing back. And that's the politics we're sort of going to ensure that Maharashtra votes for. And that's the government we're going to ensure we form in the state.
Okay. One final question to end this fun conversation is that what are your future aspirations now as a queer politician, and how are you going to sort of utilize this space to talk about the LGBTQ rights?
I think it's an incredibly important responsibility, and I think the way to sort of talk about LGBTQ plus rights is by performing my tasks to the best of my abilities. When I go on television to speak about Badlapur, when I go on television to speak about the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj statue collapsing, when I go on television to speak about the sort of collapse of our democratic institutions, I go there as an out and proud queer man who has the ability to represent his party regardless of his gender or sexuality. That's the most important part. In addition to that, I think it's important to bring more queer people into politics, not just to talk about queer issues. So we've just had a sort of Google form go out. So please, if you're watching, please go see my Instagram profile or the party's sort of social media posts. We're now getting younger queer people to volunteer with the party and to find a future for themselves within the party. Already 150 people have signed up. Young queer people who are eager to make a difference. And I want to ensure that young queer people who thought that politics is not for them, that they never could have a future in Indian politics, can find a pathway to enter politics and to craft a future for themselves and to talk about the issues they want to talk about. And that's how I want to ensure that my commitment to LGBTQ plus rights goes forward in the party, but also in the larger political landscape of the country.
This was our conversation with Mr. Anish Gawande, national spokesperson for NCP SP, an gay politician in India, and a writer, a translator, and co-founder of the Pink
List India.
Pink List India. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for.
Thank you very, very much. This was very, very fun.
Thank you.
And I hope to talk again very, very soon.
Yeah, hopefully.